Today, we're diving headfirst into the twisted world of one of history's most notorious figures, Charles Manson. This charismatic yet dangerous cult leader, who held sway over the Manson family, masterminded the bone-chilling Tate LaBianca murders in 1969 that shook America to its core. But what truly lurked behind Manson's hypnotic gaze? Was he a psychopath or just a master manipulator? In psychiatric shorthand, was he mad or bad? Throughout this video, using the last and most complete psychological assessment carried out on Charles Manson in 1997, we'll unravel the layers of Manson's mind, exploring whether he was mentally ill, his personality, his manipulations, his chilling lack of remorse, and the chilling charisma that lured his followers into committing heinous crimes and has been used to fuel the accelerationism movement headed by right-wing groups such as the Atomwaffen Division and the Base. Stick around until the end, where we'll answer the million-dollar question: was Charles Manson truly mad, or was this all just the elaborate, terrifying act of an evil man? Trust me, you won't want to miss this revelation. Let's get started on this chilling journey. In August 1997, Charles Manson was transferred to the California Supermax prison at Pelican Bay because he was suspected of smuggling LSD and cannabis into his previous prison. Because Pelican Bay was under a federal court mandate to clear its secure housing unit of inmates with mental illness, it was important to establish definitively if Manson was suffering from an axis 1 mental illness or not. In psychiatric shorthand, was he mad or bad? The multi-axial model of mental illness was used by the DSM-4 at the time of this assessment to classify mental illness. Axis 1 disorders included major mental disorders like depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. Axis 2 included personality disorders and intellectual disabilities, such as borderline personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Axis 3 comprised general medical conditions which may impact or be relevant to mental disorders, like diabetes or heart disease. Axis 4 comprised psychosocial and environmental problems, like unemployment, divorce, or homelessness. Axis 5 was a global assessment of functioning, or GAF, a score 0 to 100 to represent the overall psychological, social, and occupational functioning of an individual. It is important to explain some of Manson's background in order to understand the interpretation of some of the tests. So let's look into it very quickly. Manson's mother was an alcoholic who supported herself through sex work. Manson's father appears to have been Colonel Walker Henderson Scott Sr., against whom Manson's mother filed a paternity suit, which settled in 1937. His mother abandoned him on multiple occasions, and he was often raised by his maternal grandparents. Manson's mother was jailed for armed robbery when he was 5 years old, and he lived with his mother's sister and her husband until she was released when he was 8. His criminal career began when he was living with his aunt, when, at the age of 7, he stole a neighbor's Christmas toys and set them on fire. Manson returned to his mother at the age of 8, but when he was 12, she went to court to claim inability to care for Manson, and he was sent to the Jabal School for Boys in Indiana. Manson ran away to his mother on many occasions, but she always returned him there. By the age of 13, he was involved in car theft and armed robbery and entered juvenile detention. His experience of juvenile detention was awful, with multiple beatings and intimate assaults perpetrated on him. As he aged, he became the perpetrator of these assaults instead of the victim. At the age of 19, he was released from juvie, but by the age of 20, his parole was revoked, and he returned to prison where he stayed until he was 32 years of age. By that age, he was completely institutionalized, and prior to his release requested to be allowed to remain in prison. This request was denied. At the time of evaluation, Manson was 63 years of age. 46 of those years had been spent behind bars, and 12 were during his childhood. He had previously been evaluated by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and diagnosed with schizophrenia, most likely of the paranoid subtype, schizotypal personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic and paranoid traits. He expressed the idea that people could place thoughts in his mind and control his actions. denied any involvement in the Tate LaBianca murders. Manson was very aware of his notoriety and viewed himself as being taken advantage of by others who made money from his notoriety. While he remained imprisoned and poor, he was reported to be intentionally mendacious, manipulative, crafty, and seductive, with a good grasp of human motivations. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale Revised, WISE-R, is a widely used intelligence test that assesses cognitive ability in adults, measuring various aspects of intelligence, such as verbal comprehension, perceptual organization, working memory, and processing speed. He had previously had 2 IQ tests in 1951 and 1956, which showed IQs of 109 and 121 respectively. 109 is within the average range and 121 is in the top 10% of people. When tested in 1997, he scored 105, which is in the average range. Variation in IQ isn't unusual, and one possible explanation for this in Manson's case would be a loss of IQ secondary to enduring severe mental illness such as schizophrenia. It is well known that chronic schizophrenia can result in decreased cognitive function. The Test of Nonverbal Intelligence, second edition, is a language-free measure of general intelligence aimed at assessing cognitive abilities in individuals with speech, language, or cultural differences. While Manson had a third-grade educational level, his reading and nonverbal comprehension levels were very poor, with 99% of adults having better reading and nonverbal comprehension. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory is a widely used psychological test that assesses personality traits and psychopathology. It consists of 567 true or false questions designed to generate a comprehensive profile of an individual's psychological makeup, aiding clinicians in diagnosing mental disorders, identifying personality structure, and formulating treatment plans. The findings of the MMPI were consistent with diagnoses of schizophrenia and antisocial personality disorder, and showed comprehension and language difficulties in keeping with the Tony II findings. While his findings were consistent with schizophrenia, he wasn't found to be actively psychotic at the time of review. Manson was also found to experience little, if any, anxiety, was pathologically self-focused, and felt omnipotently capable of defending his grandiose self-image. This is in keeping with him being a narcissistic psychopath. Manson was also found to be able to control his affect, his outward emotional appearance, and to use this control to manipulate others. The Hare Psychopathy Checklist Revised, PCLR, is a diagnostic tool used to rate a person's psychopathic or antisocial tendencies, often applied in forensic settings to assess the likelihood of criminal recidivism. Manson scored a 36 on the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. This is above the US cutoff of 30 for diagnosing psychopathy. To put this into perspective, 97% of US prisoners score lower than a 36. The Rorschach test, often referred to as the Rorschach ink blot test, is a psychological tool that's used to explore a person's personality characteristics and emotional functioning. It was developed by Swiss psychiatrist Hermann Rorschach in the early 20th century. Here's how it works. The test consists of 10 ink blots. 5 of them are black and white, 2 are black and red, and the remaining 3 are multicolored. These ink blots are symmetrical patterns created by folding paper with ink blots in half. They don't represent anything specific. When you take the test, you'll look at each ink blot, one at a time, and tell the examiner what you see. Now, these are not clear images, and they aren't meant to be. They're ambiguous shapes, and the idea is to give free rein to your imagination. The shapes can look like anything to you. There's no right or wrong answer. Responses are then analyzed based on various factors such as the location of your perceived images, what about the ink blot prompted your response, and what you saw in the ink blot. The Rorschach test is not a pass or fail type of test. Instead, your responses provide clues about how you process information, how you feel, and how you see the world. For example, if you tend to see aggressive scenes in the ink blots, it could suggest you're feeling angry or threatened. It's important to remember that the Rorschach test is just one tool among many that psychologists might use when assessing a person's mental health or personality. It must be interpreted within the broader context of a person's life, behavior, and other assessments. Now, let's look at the 10 Rorschach ink blot tests. and hear Manson's answers. I should note that this isn't Manson speaking, but rather a sound-alike.
A bat. 'Cause the wings, the center, the way it has claws from the pussy-shaped thing. There is a bat face. Bats' faces are wrinkled. Those two things sticking up, their tail. A pussy looks like that. Two mounds protruding. Womb, because that is the way a woman looks. It assimilates looking down. Female legs spread apart or facing it, looking right at it. Womb holds fascination in a man's mind. Two KKK men with wings, sitting on top of the heads of two Negroes with a boot on the bottom of it. KK Klan Negroes, simultaneous, wings. Has to have something to do with him. Two Chihuahuas rubbing noses. Here is the long, pointy snouts, short Chihuahua ears, their butts turned toward each other along with their noses. Two guys yelling at each other, their lips hanging over, bits of spit coming out. A supersonic jet airplane. It's got spray. It's a jet motor. Different colors make it look in motion. Two dancers with female breasts and male genitals with hands on top of a male skinhead with sunglasses. Heavy shades. Round shape looks like space goggles. Don't have hair this round. And a butterfly with two hearts. Wings, two hearts on a butterfly with two hearts as wings, shape and color red. Goofy uterus, pussy on top of a robot's head. A big robot with a helmet on, arms not showing. It's a Borg like on Star Trek, remember? Pussy? It's the same thing. Get the effect when you fold the paper. The split suggests the womb.
A Batman, that's Batman like in the movie. The antennas of a bat, the tail, the wings, looks like a fiction. More like Batman character than a real bat.
Two alligators, here are the jaws. Two Rip Van Winkles asleep, the hair, because it's broken lines on a mustache and beard. Each one looks like a pussy. Two dogs looking out from the lips of a pussy. Looks like two frogs talking to each other. Two gookie-like rodents talking to each other. Looks like the top of a dick with a French tickler. Definitely phallic. Two females staring at each other. Don't get much out of it? Looks like two of something, jaw stuck out. Looks like Broadway play Unsinkable Molly Brown. Got that pixie look, Pekingese-like look. Two clowns, court jesters, hat, eyes, nose, slunk back. Just two of them looking away from each other. Two lizards crawling up the backbone. Here's the backbone. Burrow or deer backbone. Looks like two big dinos at the bottom. Head, feet, tail, looking up at the blue birds. Head of a wolf. Lighter part looks like eyes, snout, two little bluebirds. Looks like flying inside the blue pattern. A dragon sitting on top of a witch's head. Her head is coming from dragon's eyes. Mouth open with potbellies coming out. Looks like a hippie with a mustache wearing shades with the Eiffel Tower top on of his head. There are two caterpillars on the side. Mouths are open. On top of head is the tower. Two caterpillars similar to the one sat on a toadstool smoking a pipe. Two dancing beetles on top of the caterpillar's head holding up the Eiffel Tower. Two blue eyes waving green flags coming out of yellow morning glories. The yellow flowers are blooming from a lobster claw. Blue elves, spiritual elves' feet, little pot bellies, shaped like morning glories. First one I ever seen. I can see anything I want.
Manson's RPAS didn't diagnose him with schizophrenia, but did find several schizophrenia-associated abnormalities in thought. Based on his answers, Manson was diagnosed with psychotic disorder, not otherwise specified, a disorder closely associated with schizophrenia, as well as severe thought disorder, narcissistic and borderline traits, and primary psychopathy. No evidence of any auditory or visual hallucinations was noted. Abnormalities of mood were noted, and there was concern that Manson might have suffered from bipolar affective disorder. It was also noted that he felt very misunderstood, abnormally controlled and unfairly treated, plotted against and detached from others, including from his own family. There was a marked preoccupation with sex and aggression, with Manson scoring higher than 92% of others on these scales. It was noted that Manson met the criteria of the dark tetrad of psychopathy, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and sadism. Various subscales to test for malingering were negative, so the results of these tests appear valid. It was suggested that his bizarre visual imagery may have been related to his LSD use, which is known to result in long-term visual aberrations. It was felt that the driver of his homicidal actions were personal grievance towards Terry Melcher, a well-known record producer who had rejected Manson's fantasies of stardom in the house. in which the Tate killings took place and his grandiose fantasies of world domination. This psychological assessment could only be released after Charles Manson's death following cardiac arrest precipitated by complications from colon cancer and respiratory failure on November 19, 2017, at the age of 83. So, what do I make of all of these findings? I personally feel the Rorschach test is very subjective and put a lot more weight in the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. The results of this test, combined with the decreasing IQ over time, and Manson's forensic history lead me to believe that his most likely diagnoses were antisocial personality disorder and a waxing-waning paranoid schizophrenia, with episodes of paranoid psychosis being brought on by his drug abuse. This would account for his widely varying behavior during various court appearances and interviews, ranging from cogent, insightful, and manipulative to word salad incoherence. So, was he mad, bad, or sad? Well, he clearly met the criteria for being diagnosed with conduct disorder prior to 18 and antisocial personality disorder after 18. His hair psychopathy checklist score confirms he was also a psychopath. So, to put it colloquially, he was clearly bad at all times. On top of his psychopathy, he also had a waxing-waning paranoid schizophrenia, which meant that he was, to put it colloquially, mad as well as bad. But even when not psychotic, he was still a psychopath, and it appears to be this psychopathy which drove his animus against the music industry member who rejected him, and which led to the attack against the house that music industry member owned, and which Sharon Tate now lived in. All in all, Manson's presentation is complex and isn't neatly explained by a single diagnosis. This is undoubtedly one of the reasons opinions have been so varied over time, and why he is such a fascinating figure to forensic psychiatrists and psychologists. I hope you've enjoyed this video on Charles Manson's last and most definitive psychological testing. I've included a link to the relevant paper in the description for anyone who wishes to read it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing this video with others. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Until we meet again, take care and stay safe.